The pregnancy test landed in the porcelain sink with a sharp click. Two pink lines. Impossible. Seraphine Ashcroft stared at the plastic stick like it was evidence at a crime scene, which in a way it was. She was 28 years old, a genetic counselor at one of Boston's most prestigious hospitals. She understood biology better than most doctors, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had never been intimate with any man. The fluorescent lights of the Winterbourne Memorial Hospital bathroom hummed overhead. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of the sink. White knuckles. Steady breathing. The training kicked in automatically. When confronted with impossible data, you don't panic. You analyze. 3 months ago, the winter gala at Winterbourne Estate. She closed her eyes and let the memory surface. The ballroom had been magnificent that night. Crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across marble floors. Women in gowns that cost more than most people's cars. Men in tuxedos discussing mergers and Senate races. The Winterbourne Circle's annual gathering where Boston's oldest families renewed alliances and settled scores with champagne and carefully chosen words. Sarah had been there as staff, not a guest, never a guest. She was Ashcroft by blood, yes, one of the 7 founding families. But orphaned at 18, raised in the servant quarters of the Hargrove estate, she existed in that peculiar limbo of the Circle's world, too well-bred to be dismissed, too poor to matter. Dr. Marlowe Ashcroft had found her in the servants' quarter that night, her cousin, one of the few family members who still acknowledged her existence. "You look pale, Sarah. When was your last checkup?" "I'm fine, Marlowe. Humor me, just a quick vitamin shot. B12 for the anemia." The injection had taken 30 seconds. A slight pinch in her upper arm. Marlowe's professional smile. "There, you'll feel better in a few days." Sarah opened her eyes, stared at the pregnancy test again. B12 didn't make you pregnant. She wrapped the test in paper towels, buried it deep in the trash beneath other waste. Then she washed her hands 3 times. Muscle memory from years of lab work. Remove the contamination, eliminate the evidence. But some evidence couldn't be buried. Her shift ended at 6. She walked through Winterbourne Memorial's corridors with the same measured pace she always used, nodding to nurses, avoiding eye contact with the attending physicians who took credit for her work. The genetic counseling department occupied the 4th floor. Sarah's office was barely larger than a closet. 1 desk, 1 computer, 1 window overlooking the parking garage. But it was hers. The one space in the world where her competence mattered more than her bank account. Her last appointment of the day sat in the consulting room, a couple in their early 30s. The Hendersons, 3rd trimester, high-risk pregnancy. They'd been referred after 3 other specialists missed something in their carrier screening. Sarah pulled up the genetic panel on her monitor. "Dr. Carraway said everything looked normal," Mrs. Henderson said. Her voice carried that particular tension of people trying to convince themselves. "Dr. Carraway is an excellent physician," Sarah said, which was technically true. Carraway was excellent at taking credit. "But I wanted to run a more comprehensive analysis." She highlighted a section of the genomic data. "Here, chromosome 15, locus 15q23. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. "What am I looking at? A variant mutation, Tay-Sachs disease. You're both carriers. There's a 50% chance your child will inherit the condition." The silence that followed was the kind Sarah knew well. The moment when people realized that biology didn't care about their plans. "What does that mean?" Mrs. Henderson's hand found her stomach. "It means we need specialized prenatal monitoring, gene therapy options, a neonatal care team standing by at delivery." Sarah kept her voice level. "Facts, not fear. Your baby has challenges ahead, but we caught it. That's what matters." She spent the next hour walking them through protocols, treatment options, clinical trials. By the time they left, Mrs. Henderson was crying, but the tears were relief, not despair. Sarah closed the file, marked it complete, and watched through her office window as Dr. Carraway intercepted the Hendersons in the hallway. She couldn't hear the conversation. Didn't need to. Carraway's hand on Mr. Henderson's shoulder, his reassuring smile. The subtle positioning that made it clear he was the Dr. Sarah, just the technician who ran the tests. The official report would list Carraway as the diagnosing physician. Sarah's name would appear in the footnotes, if at all. This was the pattern, had been for 3 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about your condition. Dr. Adelaide Chen." Sarah stared at the message. Dr. Chen, the private physician she'd visited that morning, outside the Circle, outside Winterbourne Memorial. Someone she'd trusted because She had no connection to the families that controlled Sarah's life. She typed back, "How did you get my number?" The response came immediately. "From your intake form. I ran the paternity test. You need to see the results. My office tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone." Sarah deleted the messages, shut down her computer, gathered her coat and bag with movements that felt mechanical. The November cold hit her as she stepped outside. Boston in late autumn, the kind of wind that cut through expensive wool and cheap cotton with equal contempt. She took the T from the hospital to Back Bay. Dr. Chen's office occupied the second floor of a brownstone on Commonwealth Avenue. Discreet, anonymous, the kind of practice that catered to people who needed medical care without questions. The waiting room was empty at 8 p.m. Dr. Chen's receptionist had gone home, just Chen herself standing in the doorway of her office. A woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Steady hands, kind eyes. The sort of doctor who'd seen everything and been surprised by nothing. Until now. "Come in, Seraphine." Not Sarah, her full name. That was the first sign this wasn't routine. The office was small, diplomas on the wall, a desk covered in files, 2 chairs. Chen closed the door and pulled out a folder. "I ran the paternity test 3 times, Chen said. "Different labs, different methodologies. The results are consistent." She laid out a sheet of paper covered in columns of data. Genetic markers, probability percentages. The kind of analysis Sarah could read as easily as English. Her eyes found the conclusion. 99.97% probability of paternity. And the name, Barrett Alaric Winterbourne. The room tilted slightly. Sarah sat down without realizing she'd moved. "That's impossible. Genetically, it's certain." Chen's voice was clinical, professional. "But you're right that natural conception seems unlikely. These markers." She pointed to a section of the data. "They suggest laboratory insemination. The genetic material was introduced artificially." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, protocols, procedures. "I've never had IUI, never been to a fertility clinic, never authorized any kind of—" "I believe you." Chen cut her off gently. "Which means someone performed the procedure without your knowledge or consent." The words hung in the air like smoke. "How? A standard intrauterine insemination takes less than 5 minutes. If someone had access to the genetic material in a window of opportunity." Chen trailed off soft. "You mentioned that you received a vitamin injection at a gala 3 months ago." Sarah's hand went to her upper arm, the spot where Marlowe had administered the shot. "That's enough time," Chen continued, "if the injection contained hormones to prepare your uterus for implantation. If the procedure was performed while you were unconscious or sedated." "I wasn't unconscious. I was at the gala the entire night." "Were you alone at any point?" "Did you feel unusually tired? Any gaps in your memory?" Sarah thought back. The gala, the champagne she'd declined because she was working, the long hours standing in the servant corridor waiting to be useful, the bathroom break around midnight. She'd felt dizzy, attributed it to skipping dinner. She'd steadied herself against the marble vanity, splashed cold water on her face. And then, nothing unusual. She'd returned to her post, but there'd been a 20-minute gap, maybe longer, the kind of blank space you didn't notice at the time because nothing seemed wrong. "Someone sedated me," Sarah said slowly, "performed the procedure, and I never knew." Chen nodded. "The Barrett Winterbourne connection complicates this. You understand who he is." Sarah almost laughed. "Everyone in Boston knew Barrett Winterbourne, CEO of Winterbourne Medical Foundation, billion-dollar genetic research empire, candidate for the U.S. Senate, 36 years old and already positioned to be one of the most powerful men in Massachusetts. I've never spoken to him," Sarah said, "never been introduced. We exist in different tiers of the circle. The circle, the Winterbourne circle, 7 founding families, old money, older rules." Sarah stood paced to the window. Commonwealth Avenue stretched below, lit by street lamps. "They have their own hierarchy, their own laws. Barrett Winterbourne is at the top. She paused. "I'm Ashcroft by blood, but my family's gone. I'm nobody." "You're carrying Barrett Winterbourne's child," Chen said quietly. "That makes you somebody." Sarah turned from the window. "What do I do?" "You confront him, tell him what happened, demand answers." Chen hesitated. "But be careful. Men with that kind of power don't like surprises." "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice." Chen pulled out a business card, wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal cell. If you need anything, if you feel unsafe, call me." Sarah took the card, slipped it into her wallet next to the ID that still listed her address as the Hargrove Estate servant quarters. She left Chen's office and walked. Not toward the T station, not toward home, just walked. Her feet carried her through Back Bay across the public garden up Beacon Hill. The streets grew quieter, the houses larger. These were the neighborhoods where the circle lived, where people had family names instead of just last names. She found herself standing outside the iron gates of Winterbourne Estate. The mansion rose behind the fence like something from another century. Georgian architecture, white columns, windows that glowed with warm light. Somewhere inside, Barrett Winterbourne was living his life, preparing for his Senate campaign, making decisions that affected millions of people. And he had no idea that his genetic legacy was growing inside a woman he'd never met. Sarah pulled out her phone and found Winterbourne Medical Foundation's main number on their website, after-hours service. I need to speak with Barrett Winterbourne. Mr. Winterbourne isn't available. If you'd like to leave a message, tell him Seraphine Ashcroft needs to discuss a genetic matter. It's urgent. I'll be at the estate gates. She hung up before the operator could refuse. Then she waited. The November wind cut through her coat. Her breath formed clouds in the cold air. She counted her heartbeats, kept her hands in her pockets so they wouldn't shake. 15 minutes passed. Then headlights appeared in the circular driveway, a black car, not a limousine. Something understated, German engineering and quiet money. The gates opened. The car pulled through and stopped. Stopped just inside the entrance. The rear window rolled down. Barrett Winterbourne looked exactly like his photographs. Dark hair going silver at the temples. Sharp features that suggested both intelligence and old bloodlines. He wore a suit even at 9 p.m., the kind that was custom-tailored to make authority look natural. His eyes found hers, gray, cold, assessing. Miss Ashcroft. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, controlled. You have 2 minutes to explain why you're at my gate claiming a genetic emergency. Sarah stepped closer, met his gaze without flinching. I'm pregnant. The child is yours, and I have DNA evidence to prove it. Something flickered across his face, not shock, something sharper, recognition maybe, or confirmation of something he already suspected. Get in the car. It wasn't a request. Sarah climbed into the back seat. The door closed with the solid thunk of German engineering. The interior smelled like leather and subtle cologne. Barrett sat across from her. Between them, a tablet computer rested on the center console. He picked it up, tapped the screen, pulled up a file. Dr. Adelaide Chen ran your paternity test at 3 different labs, he said. Gentech Boston, Biomark Cambridge, Precision Genomics in Worcester, all came back with 99.97% probability that I'm the biological father. Sarah's breath caught. How do you... I've had people monitoring genetic testing facilities for 3 months. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen, her own genetic profile. The same data Chen had shown her. Ever since someone stole my genetic material from Winterbourne Cryogenics. The car started moving. Sarah realized they were driving through the estate grounds, toward the main house. Someone stole your... 6 months ago, I banked genetic material at our private facility. Barrett's voice was flat, clinical. Circle tradition, preserve bloodline genetics, avoid scandal during a political campaign. He glanced at her. 3 months ago, security detected a breach. My sample was gone. You think I stole it? No, he pulled up another file. This one showed financial transactions, wire transfers. I think Delphine Blackwell paid a lab technician named Marcus Thorne $100,000 to steal it. I think she hired your cousin doctor, Marlo Ashcroft, to perform an IUI. And I think Marlo switched the target. The car stopped. They were at the main entrance of Winterbourne Estate. Get out, Barrett said. We're not having this conversation in a vehicle. Sarah followed him through doors that were older than America. The entrance hall was everything she'd imagined. Marble floors, oil paintings of dead Winterbournes, a chandelier that probably cost more than she'd earned in her lifetime. Barrett led her to a study. Mahogany everywhere, bookshelves floor to ceiling, a desk that looked like it had witnessed 2 centuries of Winterbourne decisions. 3 people waited inside, 2 men in expensive suits, lawyers clearly, and 1 woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent her life protecting powerful men from consequences. This is Seraphine Ashcroft, Barrett said to them. Then to Sarah, my legal team, they've been investigating this situation for 2 weeks. One of the lawyers stepped forward, opened a briefcase, pulled out a thick folder. Miss Ashcroft, we have evidence that Delphine Blackwell orchestrated the theft of Mr. Winterbourne's genetic material. We have recordings of her conversations with Marcus Thorne. We have financial records of the payments. He laid out documents like he was building a case. We also have a statement from Dr. Marlowe Ashcroft. He played an audio file. Marlowe's voice filled the room. Delphine paid me $200,000 to perform the IUI on her. She wanted to bind herself to Barrett through a child. Lock in a marriage, secure her position. A pause. But I switched the sample. I implanted it in Sarah instead. Sarah's legs went weak. She sat down in one of the leather chairs without asking permission. Why? Her voice barely worked. Marlowe's recorded voice continued. Because Delphine would weaponize that child, use it for political leverage. Sarah is family. Ashcroft blood. I trust her more than I trust Delphine's ambitions. The recording ended. Sarah looked at Barrett. You knew. Before I showed up at your gate, you already knew. We've had DNA confirmation for 1 week, the female lawyer said. We were planning to contact you tomorrow with a formal proposal. What kind of proposal? Barrett walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a document bound in leather. A bloodline contract, circle tradition. He placed it on the desk in front of her. You move into Winterbourne Estate immediately. Live here as a bloodline carrier until the birth. After delivery, you receive a $5 million settlement. The child remains with the Winterbourne family. You relinquish all parental rights, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement about the entire situation. Sarah stared at the contract. $5 million. More money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. You're buying my child. I'm protecting my legacy. Barrett's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. Circle law is clear. Bloodline takes precedence. The child you're carrying is Winterbourne. That's not negotiable. I didn't agree to any of this. Sarah stood. Someone drugged me, violated my body, implanted a child without my consent. And now you want me to just, accept it, sign away my rights, disappear. The alternative is worse. The female lawyer spoke. If you refuse the contract, the circle court will be convened. They'll declare you an unfit mother, strip your parental rights through legal channels. You'll get nothing. The child will be taken regardless. That's not legal. The circle doesn't answer to Massachusetts law, Miss Ashcroft. We have our own courts, our own bylaws, 7 founding families with combined resources that make state laws flexible. Sarah looked at each of them. The lawyers with their expensive suits and cold eyes, Barrett with his controlled expression and colder calculations. And she thought about her mother. Emmeline Ashcroft had been brilliant, a geneticist before Sarah was born. She died when Sarah was 10. Official cause pulmonary embolism. Genetic clotting disorder. Sarah had believed that for 18 years, until last year when she'd run new genetic analysis on her mother's autopsy samples, using technology that hadn't existed in 2006, and found no clotting genes, no genetic disorder, just traces of anticoagulant poisoning. Someone had murdered Emmeline Ashcroft, made it look genetic, and gotten away with it for 18 years. Sarah had tried to investigate, but she'd been alone. No resources, no proof, no platform. Now she stood in Winterbourne Estate, surrounded by people who thought money and bloodline made them untouchable. And she realized something. They weren't untouchable. They were just protected by silence. No, Sarah said. Barrett's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I'm not signing your contract. I'm not selling my child. And I'm not disappearing. She picked up the leather-bound document, held it for a moment, then dropped it back on the desk. I'm a geneticist. I work with evidence, DNA, facts that don't lie. She met Barrett's gaze. And I'm going to find out exactly who orchestrated this, why they chose me, and what else they're hiding. The female lawyer stepped forward. Miss Ashcroft, you don't understand the danger. I understand perfectly. Sarah turned toward the door. Your circle has been getting away with crimes for generations because nobody challenges you, because people are afraid, or bought off, or both. She paused at the threshold. I'm not afraid, and I can't be bought. They'll destroy you, Barrett said. His voice was quiet, almost regretful. Maybe. Sarah looked back at him. But I'll make sure everyone knows why. She walked out of the study, through the entrance hall, past portraits of dead Winterbournes who'd probably committed crimes that were now family legends. One of the lawyers called after her. Miss Ashcroft, if you refuse the contract, we cannot guarantee your safety. Sarah kept walking. My grandmother controls the circle court, Barrett said. He'd followed her to the door. Octavia Winterbourne. She'll have you declared unfit. She'll take the child by force if necessary. Sarah stopped, turned. Then I'll find evidence that she can't suppress, build a case she can't dismiss, and expose whatever she's been hiding. She paused. Because something tells me your grandmother has more secrets than just this stolen sample. She saw something flicker across Barrett's face. Surprise, maybe respect. You have no idea what you're challenging, he said. No, Sarah agreed. But I'm good at research. I'll figure it out. She left Winterbourne Estate at 10:47 p.m. The gates closed behind her with a sound like a prison door. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. That was brave, also stupid. They'll come for you now. B, she didn't need to ask who B was. Sarah walked toward the T station. Her hands were steady now, her mind already working through the problem like it was a genetic puzzle. Someone had stolen Barrett's genetic material. Someone had paid Marlowe to perform the IUI. Someone had chosen Sarah as the target. But why Delphine Blackwell wanted to bind herself to Barrett? That made sense, but why would Marlowe switch to Sarah? Because Sarah is family, Ashcroft blood. The recording had said that, but what did it mean Sarah's family was gone? Her mother dead at 42, her father dead 6 months later in a car accident. Drunk driving, the police said, though her father had never touched alcohol. 2 parents, dead within 6 months. When Sarah was 18 and had no resources to question the official stories, she reached the T station, descended into the familiar smell of underground transit, fluorescent lights, late-night commuters who didn't make eye contact. Her phone buzzed again. This time not a text, a call. Unknown number. Sarah answered. Miss Ashcroft, a woman's voice, older, refined, the kind of accent that came from generations of private schools. This is Octavia Winterbourne. Sarah's breath caught. My grandson tells me you refused a very generous offer. Your grandson tried to buy my child. He tried to protect you from a situation you don't understand. Octavia's voice was silk over steel. The circle has rules, Miss Ashcroft. Bloodline protocols that have governed our families for 200 years. You cannot simply walk away from Winterbourne genetics. Watch me. I'm afraid I can't allow that. A pause. You see, the Ashcroft family has been problematic for quite some time. Your mother, your father, both had inconvenient interests in matters that didn't concern them. Sarah stopped walking. Commuters flowed around her like water around stone. What did you say? Emmeline was investigating Circle financial records before she died. Your father was writing articles about old money and new corruption. They were distractions, problems. So we solved them. The platform noise faded. Sarah's hearing narrowed to just Octavia's voice. You killed them. I protected the circle, just as I'm protecting it now. Octavia's tone didn't change. Might have been discussing the weather. You have a choice, Miss Ashcroft. Sign the bloodline contract. Take the money, disappear into a comfortable life, or refuse, and discover what happens to Ashcrofts who challenge Winterbourne authority. The call ended. Sarah stood on the platform. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage. 18 years. She'd spent 18 years believing her parents died from bad luck. A clotting disorder, a drunk driving accident, and in 30 seconds, Octavia Winterbourne had just confessed to murdering them both. The train arrived, doors opened. Sarah got on automatically. She sat in a corner seat, pulled out her phone, opened the voice recorder app. The call had been recorded. Every word. But voice recordings could be dismissed, explained away. She needed more. She needed evidence that would stand up to the kind of lawyers the Winterbournes employed. Evidence that would survive circle pressure. Evidence that would be so overwhelming, so irrefutable, that not even 200 years of bloodline privilege could suppress it. And she knew where to start. Her mother's autopsy samples, stored at Winterbourne Memorial Hospital, in the Genetic Counseling Department's long-term biobank. Sarah had access. She had the skills. She had the motivation. She got off at her stop, walked 3 blocks to the small apartment she rented in Cambridge. 1 bedroom, cheap furniture, but it was hers. Inside, she went straight to the closet, pulled out a box she hadn't opened in years, her mother's research notes, Emmeline's files from her years as a geneticist. Sarah had saved them when she was 18, couldn't bear to throw away the last evidence of her mother's brilliance. Now she spread them across her kitchen table. Financial records, notes about discrepancies in Circle charitable trusts, names of board members, amounts that didn't add up. Emmeline had been building a case, not about genetics, about embezzlement, and someone had killed her for it. Sarah pulled out her laptop, started a new file, titled it The Winterborn Investigation. Then she began to work. She had degrees from MIT and Harvard. She had 3 years of experience in genetic analysis. She had access to hospital databases and biobanks. She had her mother's research. And she had rage that had been building for 18 years without knowing what it was for. Now she knew. Outside her window, Boston glowed with late-night lights. Somewhere in those lights, the Winterborn Circle was making decisions, moving pieces, planning how to neutralize the Ashcroft problem. But they'd made a mistake. They'd given her a reason to fight back, and they'd underestimated what a geneticist could do with evidence and motivation. Sarah worked through the night, analyzing her mother's notes, cross-referencing dates, building timelines. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then recognized the area code. Boston Medical Center. Miss Ashcroft, this is Dr. Chen. Are you safe? I'm home. Why? Someone just tried to access your medical records from my office. They used sophisticated hacking. I caught it because I'd set up alerts after our meeting. Chen's voice was tense. They're looking for you, for proof of the pregnancy, for anything they can use. Who? The access attempt came from an IP address registered to Winterborn Medical Foundation. Sarah closed her laptop, walked to her window, looked out at the city. They're already moving. You need protection. Police, FBI, someone. The circle has judges and prosecutors on payroll. Going to the authorities won't help. Then what will you do? Sarah thought about her mother's notes. About 18 years of believing lies. About the child growing inside her that someone had put there without permission. I'm going to do what my mother started, she said. I'm going to expose them, every crime, every secret, every murder. She paused. And I'm going to make sure the whole world watches. She hung up. Then she pulled out the voice recorder app, played back Octavia's confession. I protected the circle, just as I'm protecting it now. It wasn't enough, not yet. But it was a start. Sarah sat back down at her table, opened her mother's research, and began to plan. The Winterborn Circle had 200 years of power, billions of dollars, political connections that made state laws flexible. But Sarah had something they'd forgotten about. She had the truth, and she knew how to prove it. The war had just begun. The Hargrove estate rose from Beacon Hill like a monument to old sins. Sarah hadn't been back in 6 months, not since she'd moved into her Cambridge apartment with 2 suitcases and whatever dignity she could salvage. Now she stood at the servants' entrance at 4 a.m. using the key code that probably should have been changed, but wasn't. The Hargroves were careless that way, confident in their immunity. The door clicked open. Inside the kitchen smelled the same. Lemon polish and old money. Marble countertops that cost more than most cars. Copper pots hanging from hooks like trophies. Sarah moved through the darkness with muscle memory. She'd spent 10 years in this house, knew every creaking floorboard, every shadow. The medical waste storage was in the basement, where Lysandra Hargrove kept supplies from her work on the Winterborn Memorial Hospital Administrative Board. Expired medications, used equipment, things that should have been disposed of properly, but weren't because regulations didn't apply to people like the Hargroves. Sarah descended the stairs, no lights, just the glow from her phone's flashlight. The storage room was locked, but she'd watched Lysandra open it 100 times. The combination hadn't changed. People like Lysandra never thought they needed to change codes. Who would dare violate their space? 4 numbers. Click. The door opened. Inside, medical waste bags lined metal shelves. Sarah pulled out the bank labeled Winter Gala 2024, December medical supplies. She opened it carefully, gloved hands, everything documented, vials, syringes, packaging from medications. She photographed each item, then selected 3 vials that still had liquid residue. These needed analysis, real analysis, not the kind that could be dismissed. She was sealing the vials into evidence bags when the lights blazed on. Well, look who came home. Caspian Hargrove stood in the doorway, 30 years old, 6'2", former Navy SEAL before the dishonorable discharge that Lysandra's money had erased from public record. He wore sweatpants and no shirt, probably heard the alarm system ping when Sarah entered, probably been waiting to see if she'd actually come down here. Breaking and entering little Sarah. That's bold, even for Ashcroft trash. Sarah straightened, held the evidence bags behind her back. I still have access codes, not breaking, just entering. You haven't lived here in 6 months. Caspian moved into the room. His footsteps were deliberate, predatory. That makes you a trespasser. Then call the police. He smiled. The expression didn't reach his eyes. Why would I do that? We're family. He came closer. Besides, I'm curious. What's so important in medical waste that you'd risk coming back here? Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this house concerns me. His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist, fast, the kind of speed that came from combat training. Sarah didn't struggle. Struggling with Caspian only made it worse. Let go. Show me what you took. No. His grip tightened. Not enough to bruise. Just enough to hurt. Mother's been worried about you. Says you've been asking questions, making trouble with the Winterborns. He pulled her closer. That's dangerous, Sarah. People who make trouble for the circle tend to have accidents. Like my father. The words were out before she could stop them. Caspian's expression shifted, something almost like surprise. What do you know about your father? I know his brakes failed on I-95. I know the police ruled it drunk driving, even though he never touched alcohol. I know it happened 6 months after my mother died. Sarah met his eyes. And I know your mother had something to do with it. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Caspian released her wrist, stepped back. You're playing a game you don't understand. Then explain it to me. Can't, because you're already dead, Sarah. You just don't know it yet. He moved toward the door, paused. Mother wants to see you upstairs. Now. He left. Sarah stood in the storage room. Her wrists throbbed, but she had the vials. She sealed them into her jacket pocket, then climbed the stairs. Lysandra Hargrove waited in the morning room. Even at 4 a.m. she was perfectly dressed. Cashmere sweater, pressed slacks, hair styled like she was expecting photographers. She sat in a wingback chair, queen on a throne. Seraphine, sit. It wasn't a request. Sarah sat across from her. The woman who'd taken her in at 18, given her a roof and a servant's room, and just enough cruelty to keep her grateful. You went into my medical storage. Yes. Why, I'm investigating what happened at the Winter Gala. Someone drugged me, performed a medical procedure without consent. I need to know what was in those injections. Lysandra smiled. It was worse than Caspian's. You think I don't know you're pregnant with Barrett Winterborn's child? She stood, walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Beacon Hill. Octavia called me yesterday, told me about your refusal, your threats. They weren't threats. No, Lysandra turned. You told Barrett you'd expose Circle secrets. That sounds like a threat. I said I'd find the truth. The truth, Lysandra laughed, soft, bitter. The truth is that you're an Ashcroft, last of a dying bloodline, and the Circle has been waiting 18 years for you to become a problem. Sarah's breath caught. What does that mean? Lysandra returned to her chair, sat with the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime in finishing schools. Your mother, Emmeline, was brilliant. Too brilliant. She found what Octavia had been hiding for decades. Financial crimes that would bring federal investigators. The room felt colder. And Octavia Winterborn couldn't allow that. The Circle's power depends on secrecy, on the appearance of legitimacy. If Emmeline exposed the embezzlement, federal investigators would start looking, audits would happen, the entire structure would collapse. Sarah's hands clenched. So Octavia killed her. Anticoagulant poisoning, disguised as a genetic clotting disorder. Very clever. Emmeline was a geneticist. Everyone believed it was hereditary, no investigation. And my father, Lysandra's expression didn't change. Might have been discussing stock prices. Thaddeus was a journalist. Investigative work. 6 months after Emmeline died, he started digging into her death. Found inconsistencies. Was preparing to publish. His brakes failed. Yes, on I-95, during rush hour. Lysandra paused. Octavia paid me $500,000. I arranged it through a mechanic I knew, former military, needed money, no questions asked. The words landed like physical blows. Sarah had suspected, had known in some deep place she'd tried to ignore, but hearing it confirmed. Hearing the woman who'd raised her confess so casually to murdering her father. You killed him. I facilitated his death. There's a difference. Lysandra stood again. Paced. You need to understand, Seraphine. The Circle isn't just wealthy families playing dress-up. It's a system. 200 years of accumulated power. We control hospitals, universities, courts, politicians. That control requires maintenance. Sometimes that means eliminating threats. My parents weren't threats. They were good people. They were Ashcrofts. That made them threats by definition. Lysandra stopped at a portrait on the wall, some dead Hargrove from the 1800s. The Ashcroft family has always been problematic, moral, principled, unwilling to compromise for power. 4 generations of Ashcrofts challenging circle decisions, creating friction. She turned back to Sarah. Octavia decided the solution was elimination. Systematic, thorough. Your grandparents died 15 years ago. Car accident. Your mother 18 years ago. Poisoned. Your father 16 years ago. Brake failure. Your uncle Roland and Aunt Margot 3 years ago. House fire. Sarah couldn't breathe. You're lying. I'm confessing. Lysandra's voice was almost gentle. Because you need to understand what you're facing. Octavia Winterbourne has spent 2 decades erasing the Ashcroft bloodline. You and one distant cousin are all that remain, and Octavia won't stop until every Ashcroft is gone. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired. Lysandra sat again. Suddenly she looked older, exhausted. 20 years of being Octavia's instrument, her fixer, her killer when needed. I'm 62 years old, Seraphine. I want one thing in my life to not be stained with blood. You want absolution. I want you to run. Take whatever money you have. Leave Boston. Leave Massachusetts. Disappear. Change your name. Raise that child somewhere Octavia can't reach. Sarah stood. Her legs were shaking, but she stood anyway. No, damn. You can't fight her. She has resources you can't imagine. She killed my family, all of them, systematically, for 2 decades. Sarah's voice was steel now. And you helped her. You took money to murder my father. You watched me grow up in your servant quarters knowing what you'd done. I gave you a home. You gave me a prison. Sarah pulled out her phone. And you just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder. 1st degree. Premeditated. For financial gain. Lysandra's eyes widened. Your recording voice memo started when I sat down. 2 minutes of full confession. Sarah held up the phone. Your voice, your words, admitting to murdering Thaddeus Ashcroft under Octavia Winterbourne's orders. Lysandra's face went white. That won't hold up in court. Illegally recorded. Massachusetts requires 2-party consent. It'll hold up in the court of public opinion, and it's enough to start a federal investigation. Murder for hire crosses state lines. That's FBI jurisdiction. Sarah moved toward the door. Octavia might control local courts. She doesn't control federal prosecutors. If you release that Caspian, will kill you. Let him try. Sarah left the morning room, walked through the house where she'd spent 10 years being invisible, past the grand staircase, past the dining room where she'd served meals to people who never learned her name. Caspian was waiting at the front door. Mother told you to run, didn't she? Yes. You going to tow him? No. He studied her face. Something shifted in his expression, almost like respect. You're braver than I thought, or stupider. He opened the door. Watch your back, Ashcroft. Grandmother doesn't forgive challenges. Sarah stepped into the cold November dawn. Behind her, the Hargrove estate loomed, full of secrets and blood money and people who thought power made them immortal. She had Lysandra's confession. She had the medical waste vials. She had the beginning of a case, but she needed more. Her phone buzzed. A text from Barrett Winterbourne. My office, 9 a.m. We need to talk. Sarah checked her watch. 5:17 a.m. 3 hours and 43 minutes. She went to her apartment, showered, changed into professional clothes. Navy suit, white blouse. The uniform of someone who belonged in places like Winterbourne Medical Foundation. At 7 a.m. she went to Winterbourne Memorial Hospital. Her shift didn't start until 9, but she had access. Night security knew her face. She went straight to the genetic counseling department. Her office, her computer. She pulled up the genetic database. Winterbourne Memorial had one of the largest biobanks in New England, samples from thousands of patients, including long-term storage of deceased patients' tissues for research. Sarah searched for Emmeline Ashcroft. The file was there, autopsy samples from 2006. Tissue, blood, preserved for 18 years in the hospital's cryogenic storage. Sarah downloaded the file. Then she accessed the sample requisition system, ordered Emmeline's samples transferred to the genetic counseling lab for ongoing hereditary disorder research. Standard procedure. No one would question it. By 8 a.m. she had her mother's samples, fresh vials, tissue that had been frozen perfectly for nearly 2 decades. She ran a comprehensive toxicology analysis, the kind that hadn't existed in 2006. Mass spectrometry, chromatography, molecular sequencing. The results came back at 8:47 a.m. anticoagulant, specifically a veterinary-grade compound not approved for human use. Dosage levels consistent with intentional poisoning over a 6-week period. Cause of death induced hemorrhagic stroke, made to look like genetic clotting disorder. Sarah printed the results, sealed them in her briefcase along with Lysandra's recorded confession and the medical waste vials. Then she walked to Winterbourne Medical Foundation headquarters. The building occupied an entire block in downtown Boston, glass and steel, modern, clean, the kind of architecture that said money without being vulgar about it. Barrett's office was on the top floor. His assistant showed Sarah in at exactly 9 a.m. The office was what she expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Minimalist furniture. A desk that probably cost more than her apartment's annual rent. Barrett stood at the window. Gray suit, perfect posture. He didn't turn when she entered. "You went to the Hargrove estate last night. Lysandra called me this morning. She's terrified." "She should be. She confessed to murdering my father." Now he turned. "She what?" Sarah pulled out her phone, played the recording. Lysandra's voice filled the office. Clear, distinct, every word of her confession. Barrett's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That's not admissible in court. It's enough to start an investigation. Federal, because murder for hire crosses state lines." Sarah put her phone away. "Your grandmother ordered my father's death, paid Lysandra Hargrove to arrange it. That's conspiracy. RICO predicates. The kind of thing that brings down organized crime families. You're comparing the circle to the mob. I'm comparing systematic murder to systematic murder. The venue doesn't matter." Barrett walked to his desk, sat, gestured for Sarah to do the same. She remained standing. "Why did you ask me here?" "Because you're making a mistake." He pulled out a folder, opened it. "My security team has been monitoring you since you left my estate. You infiltrated Hargrove property, stole medical waste, accessed hospital biobanks without proper authorization, recorded a conversation without consent. You're building a criminal case against yourself. I'm building a murder case against your grandmother, with evidence that won't stand up in court. Illegally obtained, chain of custody broken. Any competent lawyer will have it thrown out. Then I'll get better evidence." "How about him?" Barrett leaned forward. "My grandmother controls judges, prosecutors, hospital administrators. She's been eliminating threats for 20 years without consequence. What makes you think you'll be different?" Sarah opened her briefcase, laid out the toxicology report from her mother's samples. "Because I have proof she's been murdering people. Scientific proof, peer-reviewed methodologies. Results that can be replicated in any forensic lab in the country." Barrett picked up the report. "Read it." His jaw tightened. "This is your mother's autopsy sample, reanalyzed using current technology. The anticoagulant wasn't available commercially in 2006. It's veterinary grade, used for livestock. Someone had to source it specifically for poisoning. And you think my grandmother—" "I know your grandmother." Sarah sat now, across from him. "Lysandra's confession names her. My mother's toxicology proves murder. The only question is whether you're going to help me prove the rest or protect your family's reputation." Silence. Barrett set down the report, looked at her with those gray eyes that gave away nothing. "What else?" "What? You said prove the rest. What else are you investigating?" Sarah hesitated, then decided. "In for a penny. Your parents, Alistair and Vivian Winterbourne. They died 5 years ago. Yacht explosion. Ruled accidental storm damage. I'm aware." "What if it wasn't an accident?" Barrett's expression finally cracked. Just for a second. Pain flashed across his face before the control returned. "Don't." Lysandra said Octavia has been eliminating Ashcrofts for 20 years. My grandparents, my parents, my aunt and uncle, all made to look like accidents. What if she's been eliminating other threats too? My parents died in a storm. The marine investigation was thorough. Was it just expensive enough to look thorough? Sarah pulled out another document, her mother's research notes. Before she died, my mother was investigating Circle financial irregularities. Embezzlement from charitable trusts, $15 million over 10 years. Octavia's signature on the transfer authorizations. She slid the notes across the desk. What if your father discovered the same thing? What if he was going to expose her? What if Octavia decided that was too dangerous? Barrett didn't touch the notes. You're accusing my grandmother of killing my parents. I'm saying it's possible. And I'm asking if you want to know the truth. The truth, he stood, walked back to the window. The truth is that my parents were good people, honest people. They believed in the Circle's stated mission: medical research, charitable work, legacy preservation. His voice was controlled, but she heard the anger underneath. They died because of a storm, because nature is random and cruel, not because of my grandmother's paranoia. Then prove me wrong. Give me access to the Marine investigation files. Let me analyze the evidence. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. If I'm right, if you're right, my entire family is built on murder. He turned. Do you understand what you're asking? I understand. I'm asking you to choose between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truth. That's not a choice. That's a grenade. It's justice, Barrett laughed, sharp, bitter. Justice. You think the Circle operates on justice? He walked back to his desk, pulled out another folder. This one thicker. I had my investigators compile everything we could find on you. MIT graduate, top of your class, Harvard Medical Genetic Counseling Program. 3 years at Winterbourne Memorial with a perfect record. 47 cases solved. 12 murderers convicted based on your genetic analysis. He opened the folder. You're brilliant, Seraphine. Competent, thorough. Everything my grandmother fears. Because competent people with nothing to lose are dangerous. He met her eyes. That's why she'll kill you. Not because you're Ashcroft. Because you're good at what you do. Then help me before she gets the chance. Help you destroy my family. Help me expose the truth. There's a difference. Barrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. Fabian, it's me. I need you to pull the Marine investigation files from my parents' accident. Everything. Send them to my personal server. He paused. No, this isn't official. And Fabian, don't tell my grandmother. He hung up, looked at Sarah. You'll have the files by noon. If you find evidence of sabotage, we talk about next steps. If you don't, you drop this theory and focus on what you can prove. Agreed. And Seraphine, he stood, be careful. My grandmother doesn't just kill threats, she makes them suffer first. Sarah left Winterbourne Medical Foundation at 9:47 a.m. She had toxicology proof of her mother's murder. She had Lysandra's confession about her father. She had medical waste vials to analyze. And in 2 hours, she'd have access to the Marine investigation into Barrett's parents' deaths. The pieces were coming together, but Caspian's words echoed in her mind. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. She pulled out her phone, called Dr. Adelaide Chen. Sarah, are you okay? I need a favor, and I need you to not ask questions. What kind of favor? I'm going to send you files, evidence, recorded confessions, toxicology reports. If anything happens to me, you release them. All of them, to the FBI, to the Boston Globe, to every news outlet in Massachusetts. Silence on the line. Sarah, what are you planning? I'm planning to survive, but if I don't, someone needs to finish what I started. This is dangerous. I know. That's why I need insurance. Send me the files. Sarah spent the next hour uploading everything to Chen's secure server. Then she went to her office at Winterbourne Memorial. The medical waste vials were waiting for analysis. She ran mass spectrometry on the first vial, the one labeled B12 injection, December 7th. Results came back at 11:23 a.m. Not B12, follicle-stimulating hormone, human chorionic gonadotropin, estradiol, the exact hormone cocktail used in IUI preparation protocols. Someone had prepared her body for insemination. Without her knowledge, without her consent. Sarah printed the analysis, added it to her growing file. At noon, her computer pinged. Email from Barrett's personal server, the Marine investigation files. She opened them. Photographs of the yacht wreckage, official reports from the Coast Guard, weather data from the night of the accident, witness statements from the harbor master, and buried in the appendices of forensic analysis from an independent lab. Explosive residue detected on hull fragments. Consistent with C4 plastic explosive, quantity estimated at 2 to 3 pounds. Detonation point engine compartment, but the official conclusion had ruled it storm damage. The explosive residue was noted but dismissed as inconclusive and possibly from emergency flare containers. Sarah read the entire file twice. Then she cross-referenced the dates. The yacht explosion, November 15th, 2019. 1 week earlier, Octavia Winterbourne had a meeting scheduled with D. Torres, marine contractor. Sarah searched for D. Torres, found a LinkedIn profile. Diego Torres. marine demolitions expert, former Navy EOD, specialized in underwater explosive operations. She screenshotted everything, added it to her file. Her phone buzzed. Barrett, did you find anything with explosive residue, C4? Your grandmother met with a demolitions expert 1 week before the accident. Silence. Then send me everything. Why PM? Because if you're right, I need to see it. All of it. His voice was different now, harder. My parents died because of her. I need to know. Sarah sent the files. 2 minutes later, her phone rang again. Barrett, where are you? My office, Winterbourne Memorial. Stay there. I'm coming to you. We need to talk. And Sarah, he paused. Watch your back. If my grandmother knows you have this evidence, she'll move against you tonight. The call ended. Sarah looked around her small office. One desk, one computer, one window. She was alone, exposed, in a hospital controlled by Octavia Winterbourne's allies. She gathered her files, her evidence, everything she'd compiled. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate, multiple people. The door opened without a knock. Caspian Hargrove stood there, with 2 men in dark suits, private security, the kind hired for jobs that required discretion. Seraphine, we need you to come with us. On whose authority? Circle Court summons. You're required to appear before the magistrate. Immediately. I haven't been served formal notice. You're being served now. Caspian stepped into the office. You can come quietly, or we can make this difficult. Your choice. Sarah looked at the 2 security men, both armed, both trained. Fighting wasn't an option. Where Winterbourne Estate, the circle is convening an emergency session. Caspian smiled. Grandmother wants to talk to you about your accusations, about your evidence, about your future. He made future sound like a death sentence. Sarah picked up her briefcase, the one with all her evidence. I'm bringing my lawyer. You don't have a lawyer? Then I'm calling one. No time. The session starts in 30 minutes. Either you come now or you're held in contempt of circle law. That carries penalties you don't want to experience. Sarah looked at her computer, at the files she'd just received from Barrett, at the evidence she'd compiled. If she went to Winterbourne Estate alone with Octavia controlling the venue, she might not come back. But if she refused, they'd take her anyway, and destroy her evidence first. She made a decision. I'll come, but I'm sending a message first. She pulled out her phone, texted Barrett. They're taking me to Circle Court. Emergency session. If I don't contact you in 2 hours, assume the worst. Then she texted Chen. Release everything, 2 hours. If you don't hear from me, send it all. She looked at Caspian. Let's go. They walked through Winterbourne Memorial like a perp walk. People stared, whispered. Sarah kept her head high. Outside a black SUV waited. Tinted windows, no plates. Sarah climbed in. Caspian sat beside her, the security men in front. The vehicle pulled away from the hospital, headed toward Beacon Hill, toward Winterbourne Estate, toward Octavia. Sarah gripped her briefcase. Inside, proof of murder, proof of conspiracy, proof of 2 decades of systematic elimination. In 2 hours, if she didn't stop it, that proof would go public. The FBI would get it, the media would get it, the entire circle would be exposed. But first, she had to survive the next 2 hours. The SUV drove through morning traffic, past the Common, past the State House, up Beacon Hill, through the iron gates of Winterbourne Estate. The mansion looked different in daylight, less imposing, more like what it was, an old house where old money made old decisions. They parked at the main entrance. Caspian opened Sarah's door. Welcome home, Ashcroft. Let's see if you leave alive. The Grand Hall of Winterbourne Estate had witnessed 2 centuries of circle decisions. Portraits of dead patriarchs lined the walls. Men in colonial dress, women with knowing eyes, all of them complicit in building this machine of power. Now the hall was full, 7 tables arranged in a semicircle, each representing one of the founding families. Winterbourne, Ashcroft, Blackwell, Hargrove, Cabot, Lodge, Endicott. The Ashcroft table had 2 chairs, both empty for 18 years, until now. Sarah walked down the center aisle. Every eye tracked her movement. 100 people. Old money and older grudges. They wore their wealth casually. Tailored suits, pearls that had passed through generations. Watches worth more than houses. Caspian guided her to the Ashcroft table, pulled out a chair. Sit. Don't speak unless asked. And for God's sake, don't do anything stupid. He walked away, took his place at the Hargrove table beside Lysandra. His mother looked smaller somehow, diminished. She wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes. At the head of the semicircle sat Octavia Winterbourne. She wore black, simple, elegant, a single strand of pearls. White hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. She was 78 years old and looked like she could outlive mountains. When she spoke, the room fell silent. The circle recognizes Seraphine Ashcroft, last living heir of the Ashcroft bloodline. Her voice carried without effort. 2 centuries of command bred into every syllable. You stand before us accused of violating circle protocols, specifically refusal to honor a bloodline contract, theft of medical materials, unauthorized investigation into circle affairs, and conspiracy to expose privileged family matters to outside authorities. Sarah remained seated, didn't stand when accused. The small rebellion felt good. I'm also here because I'm carrying evidence of 5 murders, all committed by you. Gasps rippled through the hall. Octavia's expression didn't change. Bold words. Do you have proof? Yes. Present it. Sarah opened her briefcase, pulled out the toxicology report, held it up. Emmeline Ashcroft, my mother, died 18 years ago. Official cause genetic clotting disorder. Actual cause anticoagulant poisoning. Veterinary-grade compound, administered over 6 weeks. This analysis was conducted using samples preserved at Winterbourne Memorial Hospital. The methodology can be replicated in any forensic laboratory. She laid the report on the table. Who do you accuse? Octavia's voice remained calm. You discovered my mother was investigating embezzlement from Circle Charitable Trusts. $15 million missing over 10 years. Your signature on the transfer authorizations. So you poisoned her, made it look genetic. No investigation. Problem solved. Murmurs filled the hall. Octavia raised one hand. Silence returned. Interesting theory. Continue. Sarah pulled out the recording device, played Lysandra's confession. The voice filled the grand hall. Clear, damning. Thaddeus was a journalist, investigative work. 6 months after Emmeline died, he started digging into her death, found inconsistencies, was preparing to publish. His brakes failed. Yes, on I-95. During rush hour, Octavia paid me $500,000. I arranged it through a mechanic I knew. Sarah stopped the recording, looked at Lysandra. Want to deny it. Lysandra's face was ashen. She stood slowly. I was coerced, threatened. Octavia said she'd destroy my family if I didn't cooperate. Liar! Octavia's voice cut like a blade. You took the money gladly. Don't pretend morality now. The admission hung in the air. Octavia had just confirmed she'd paid for murder. Sarah pressed forward. And then there's Alistair and Vivian Winterbourne, Barrett's parents, died 5 years ago in a yacht explosion. The official report called it storm damage, but the forensic analysis found C4 explosive residue on the hull fragments. She pulled out the marine investigation file, the highlighted sections. 1 week before their deaths, you met with Diego Torres, marine demolitions expert, specialized in underwater explosive operations. You paid him $250,000. The transaction is documented in your personal accounts. Barrett stood from the Winterbourne table. His face was carved from stone. You killed my parents. I protected the circle. Octavia's mask finally cracked. Just slightly. Your father discovered the same financial irregularities that Emmeline found. He was going to demand a federal audit, expose everything we'd built. I couldn't allow that. So you murdered them. I did what was necessary. The grand hall erupted, voices overlapping, shock, outrage, some defending Octavia, some condemning her. The circle magistrate stood, an elderly man from the Cabot family, neutral arbiter for 200 years of circle disputes. Order, we will have order. The noise subsided. Miss Ashcroft, you've made serious accusations. Do you have corroborating evidence beyond the materials presented? I have financial records showing Octavia transferred $15 million from Circle Charitable Trusts to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I have medical records proving my mother had no genetic clotting disorder. I have testimony from mechanics who serviced my father's vehicle before his death. And I have documentation of payments to Diego Torres 1 week before the Winterbourne yacht explosion. She pulled out folder after folder, laid them on the Ashcroft table. I'm a geneticist. I work with evidence. DNA doesn't lie. Financial records don't lie. And dead bodies tell stories if you know how to listen. Octavia stood. Finally, her composure fractured at the edges. You arrogant child. You think exposing family business to this assembly changes anything? The circle protects its own. We always have. Your evidence means nothing here. Maybe, Sarah pulled out her phone, but it'll mean something to the FBI, to the Massachusetts Attorney General, to the Boston Globe and the New York Times and every media outlet in the country. She held up the phone. Everything I've presented here today has been uploaded to secure servers, multiple copies, multiple custodians. If I don't send a cancellation code in, she checked her watch. 47 minutes, it all goes public. Every file, every recording, every financial transaction. The hall went silent. You're bluffing, Octavia said. Try me. Barrett walked from the Winterbourne table to the Ashcroft table, stood beside Sarah. She's not bluffing. I helped her compile the evidence. The Marine investigation files came from my personal server. The financial records came from archives my father kept before he died. He didn't trust you, grandmother. Neither do I. Octavia's face twisted. Rage replacing composure. You would betray your own family. For this Ashcroft nobody. I would seek justice for my murdered parents. There's a difference. Delphine Blackwell stood from her family's table, perfectly coiffed, perfectly controlled. If I may interject, this has become emotional. Perhaps we should take a vote. Does the circle believe these accusations warrant further investigation? Or do we dismiss them as the desperate attacks of a pregnant woman trying to avoid her bloodline obligations? Seconded, someone from the lodge table called. The magistrate nodded. The circle will vote. All in favor of formal investigation into Octavia Winterbourne's conduct indicate by standing. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Lysandra Hargrove stood, trembling, tears streaming down her face. I can't carry this anymore. She's right. Octavia has been murdering people for 20 years. I helped her. God forgive me, I helped her. But I can't lie anymore. Caspian grabbed his mother's arm, tried to pull her down. She shook him off. No, Caspian, no more. Dr. Marlowe Ashcroft stood next, from the medical staff section. I performed the IUI on Sarah without her consent. I was paid by Delphine Blackwell, but Octavia knew about it. She approved it. She wanted Sarah pregnant so she could control the last Ashcroft bloodline. One by one others stood, a Cabot, an Endicott, even 2 Winterbournes. When the count finished, 5 families voted for investigation. Only Lodge and half of Winterbourne voted against. The magistrate's voice was grave. The vote carries. Octavia Winterbourne, you are subject to formal circle investigation. You will surrender all financial records, communications, and personal documents relevant to the allegations. And you will submit to questioning by an independent tribunal. Octavia's laugh was sharp, broken. You fools. You have no idea what you've done. The circle exists because of me. I held it together when it would have collapsed. When federal investigators came asking questions about our medical research, I made them disappear. When journalists started digging into our charitable trusts, I silenced them. I did what none of you had the stomach for. She pointed at Sarah. And this girl, this last worthless Ashcroft, you think she's brave? She's just too stupid to understand power. Her family was always too principled to survive. That's why I eliminated them. Every single one. The confession echoed through the grand hall. Sarah stood, walked toward Octavia. You killed my grandparents, my mother, my father, my aunt and uncle. You tried to erase my entire bloodline because we wouldn't bow to you. Her voice was steady, clear. But you made one mistake. What mistake? You left me alive. Octavia's hand moved, fast. She pulled something from her jacket, a small pistol, the kind wealthy women carried for protection. She aimed it at Sarah. Barrett moved, tried to step between them. But Octavia's hand was already rising. The gun fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed hall. People screamed. Dove for cover. Sarah felt the impact, like being hit with a hammer. Her shoulder, warm blood spreading across her blouse. She fell backward, hit the floor hard. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard shouting. Footsteps. Barrett's voice yelling for someone to call 911. Octavia stood over her, gun still raised. You should have booked the money, girl. Should have disappeared. Now you die like the rest of your family. She aimed again, at Sarah's head this time. A gunshot, but not from Octavia's weapon. Octavia jerked, spun, fell. Caspian stood 10 feet away, his own gun drawn, smoking. Enough. His voice was raw. I've watched you destroy everything. Everyone. My mother. This family. Myself. He lowered the gun. No more. Octavia lay on the marble floor, blood spreading from a chest wound, her breathing shallow. Sarah tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her shoulder. Barrett was there, pressing his jacket against the wound. Don't move. Ambulance is coming. My phone, the timer. I've got it. He pulled her phone from her pocket. What's the cancellation code? 7418. The number's her mother's birthday. Barrett entered the code. The timer stopped with 31 minutes remaining. Evidence is secure. You're secure. Just hold on. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Sarah looked at Octavia. The woman was still breathing, still alive. But the blood pooling around her told a different story. The magistrate knelt beside Octavia, his face ashen. Get the doctor, now. But they both knew it was too late. Octavia's eyes found Sarah. Some emotion flickered there. Regret, respect, impossible to tell. You won. Blood on her lips. The Ashcrofts always win, eventually. Her breathing rattled. But you'll never escape what I built. The circle will consume you, just like it consumed me. No. Sarah's voice was weak but certain. The circle dies with you. Octavia smiled. Then stopped breathing. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. They stabilized Sarah, loaded her onto a stretcher. Barrett rode with her in the ambulance. Behind them, Winterbourne Estate filled with police, federal marshals, crime scene investigators. The circle's secrets were no longer secret. Dr. Adelaide Chen met them at Massachusetts General Hospital. She'd received Sarah's final text, the one that said, releasing evidence in 2 hours, and had mobilized every contact she had. FBI agents were already at Winterbourne Estate, seizing financial records, arresting Delphine Blackwell, taking Lysandra Hargrove into custody. Caspian had surrendered his weapon, admitted to shooting Octavia. Self-defense, defense of another. The prosecutors would sort it out. In the emergency room, Chen worked alongside the trauma surgeons. Bullet went clean through, missed the brachial artery by centimeters. You're lucky. Doesn't feel lucky. You're alive. Against Octavia Winterbourne, that's as lucky as it gets. They operated for 3 hours, removed bone fragments, repaired tissue. Sarah drifted in and out of anesthesia. In her dreams, she saw her mother, Emmeline, young, smiling, holding Sarah's hand. You did it, baby. You found the truth. I couldn't save you. You saved yourself. That's all I ever wanted. When Sarah woke, it was evening. Her shoulder was bandaged, IV in her arm, monitors beeping steadily. Barrett sat in a chair beside her bed. He looked exhausted, hadn't slept, still wore his blood-stained shirt. How long was I out? 6 hours. The surgery went well. Full recovery expected in 3 months. The baby, fine. Ultrasound showed no complications. Strong heartbeat. Sarah closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. What happened after I left? FBI executed search warrants on 7 different properties. Winterbourne Estate, Hargrove Estate, Blackwell Holdings. They found everything, financial records, correspondence with the people Octavia hired to kill your family, evidence of embezzlement going back 30 years. Not just 15 million, closer to 40. And the circle disbanded, federal RICO investigation. The families are cooperating to avoid prosecution. Everyone's turning on everyone else. He paused. It's over, Sarah. Everything Octavia built, it's gone. Your family will survive damaged, but we'll rebuild. He met her eyes. My father kept records. Before he died, he suspected Octavia but couldn't prove it. Now those records corroborate everything you found. The prosecutors are calling it the largest conspiracy case in Massachusetts history. Sarah tried to sit up. Pain stopped her. Easy. Barrett adjusted her bed. You were shot 6 hours ago. You need to rest. Everything else can wait. But Sarah's mind was already working, processing. Lysandra, federal custody, she's cooperating. Full confession in exchange for reduced charges. She'll serve time, but not life. Caspian, released. The shooting was ruled justified. Defense of another. He probably saved your life. Barrett's voice was complicated. He's not pressing charges for anything you did at Hargrove Estate. Says he's done with the circle. Done with all of it. Delphine, arrested, conspiracy, bribery, illegal medical procedures. She's looking at 15 years minimum. And Marlowe, suspended medical license, criminal charges pending, but she's cooperating too. The prosecutors are building their case on testimony from everyone who participated in Octavia's crimes. Diego Torres, Extradited from Mexico. Federal charges for the yacht explosion. The evidence you provided was enough for an arrest warrant. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Marcus Thorne. Witness protection. Last anyone heard, he's somewhere in the Midwest with a new name. The money Octavia and Delphine paid him was seized. He traded wealth for survival. Sarah leaned back, exhausted. My mother would have wanted this. Justice, not revenge, just truth and consequences. You got both. Barrett stood, paced to the window. Boston spread below them. City lights, harbor in the distance. What happens now, he asked. I don't know. The bloodline contract is void. You're free to make your own choices about the pregnancy, about your future. What do you want? He turned, looked at her for a long moment. I want to know my child, not as a winter-born heir, as a father, if you'll allow it. And us? I don't know. We barely know each other. We were thrown together by crimes neither of us committed. He came back to her bedside. But I respect you, your courage, your competence, the way you fought an entire system and won. Sarah smiled slightly, pain medication making everything soft at the edges. That sounds like the start of something. Maybe, if we both survived the federal investigation, the media circus, the criminal trials. He took her hand, carefully. And if you decide you can trust a Winterborn after everything my family did to yours. Your family didn't do anything. Octavia did, and you helped me stop her. Still, the name carries weight. So does Ashcroft. They sat in silence, her hand in his, the monitors beeping, Boston glowing outside. Finally, Sarah spoke. I want to restore the Ashcroft estate, the one my family owned before Octavia started eliminating us. It's probably been seized or sold, but it hasn't. Barrett's voice was quiet. I checked. It's been held in trust, waiting for an Ashcroft heir to claim it. The paperwork will take time, but it's yours, your daughter's, your family's legacy. How did you know I'd want it? Because you're not running, you never run. You fight for what's yours. Sarah squeezed his hand. Thank you. For helping me, for believing me, for risking your family's reputation to expose the truth. My family's reputation was built on lies. You showed me that. Some things are more important than reputation. Justice, for instance. Truth. The future instead of the past. Dr. Chen entered, checked Sarah's vitals, adjusted her pain medication. You need rest, real rest. The baby needs you healthy. I'll leave. Barrett stood. No. Sarah's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. Stay, please. He looked at Chen. She nodded. 30 minutes. Then she sleeps. Chen left. Barrett sat again. Tell me about your parents, Sarah said. The real them, not the versions Octavia created. And for the next 30 minutes, Barrett talked about his father's kindness, his mother's intelligence, the way they'd believed in using wealth for good instead of power. Sarah listened and understood why Octavia had killed them. They'd been too good, too honest, too dangerous to her control. Just like Emmeline and Thaddeus Ashcroft. Just like Sarah herself. When Chen returned to enforce rest, Sarah was already half asleep. Barrett stood to leave. I'll be back tomorrow. We can talk about next steps, legal things, practical things. Barrett. Yeah, my daughter. I'm naming her Emmeline Vivian after both our mothers. His eyes softened. They'd like that. He left. Sarah drifted into real sleep, dreamless this time. The kind that came from exhaustion and relief and knowing the war was finally over. Outside her room, federal agents stood guard. The prosecutors wanted her alive for testimony, for trials that would dominate headlines for years. But for now, she was just Seraphine Ashcroft, 28 years old, pregnant, shot, alive. The last Ashcroft who'd stood against Octavia Winterborn and won. Tomorrow would bring complications. Media, legal proceedings, rebuilding. But tonight, for the first time in 18 years, Sarah slept without the weight of unanswered questions. Her parents were avenged. The truth was exposed. And the circle that had ruled Boston for 2 centuries was broken. Justice, it turned out, was exhausting, but worth every moment. 3 months later, the federal courthouse was smaller than the Grand Hall, less marble, more fluorescent lighting, but the weight of what happened here mattered more than any circle tribunal. Sarah sat in the witness box, 8 months pregnant, shoulder healed enough to raise her right hand for the oath. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She'd built her career on RICO cases. This one would make her famous. Miss Ashcroft, can you identify the defendant? Sarah looked at Delphine Blackwell, still perfectly dressed, still controlled. But the designer suit was gone. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. Yes, Delphine Blackwell. And what was her role in the conspiracy to violate your bodily autonomy? Sarah took a breath, looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people, not circle members, not old money, just citizens. She orchestrated everything. Paid Marcus Thorne to steal Barrett Winterbourne's genetic material. Paid my cousin, Dr. Marlowe Ashcroft, to perform intrauterine insemination without my knowledge or consent. She wanted to bind herself to Barrett through a child. When the plan went wrong, she tried to have me declared unfit to steal the baby. And Octavia Winterbourne's involvement. She approved the plan, financed parts of it, because she wanted control over the last Ashcroft heir. When I refused, she tried to have me killed. The testimony lasted 4 hours. By the end, 3 jurors were crying. The verdict came 2 days later, guilty on all counts. Sarah watched from the gallery as they led Delphine away. 15 years, federal prison, no parole. Barrett waited outside the courthouse. How do you feel? Tired but satisfied. He drove her home, to the Ashcroft estate, where a nursery waited, where a future waited. Justice wasn't just Octavia dying on a marble floor. It was this. Ordinary courts, ordinary people, holding the powerful accountable. The circle was gone, and in its place something better was being built. 6 months later, the Ashcroft estate rose from Commonwealth Avenue like a memory reclaimed. 3 stories of federal-style architecture. Black shutters against red brick. A garden that had grown wild during 18 years of absence, but was slowly being restored. Sarah stood in the second-floor nursery. Her shoulder still ached when it rained, but the scar tissue was healing. The doctors said full mobility would return within a year. She was more concerned with the crib she was assembling. You're doing it wrong. Barrett stood in the doorway. He wore jeans and an MIT sweatshirt. No tie, no suit. He looked younger this way, less burdened. I'm following the instructions. The instructions are wrong. Here. He came over, took the Allen wrench from her hand. You have to tighten these bolts first, then attach the side rails. Since when do you assemble furniture? Since I've been spending my weekends helping restore a mansion instead of running a medical foundation. He smiled slightly. I'm learning new skills. The Winterbourne Medical Foundation had been dissolved. Federal seizure of assets. Barrett had cooperated fully with the investigation. Testified against Delphine Blackwell. Against Lysandra Hargrove. Against everyone who'd participated in Octavia's conspiracy. In return, he'd been granted immunity. No charges filed. But the family name was damaged beyond repair. Barrett had resigned from the Senate race. Sold the Winterbourne estate to a developer who was converting it into condominiums. Downsized his life to something manageable. He still had money. Old money didn't disappear overnight. But the power was gone. The circle was gone. And he seemed relieved. There. He finished tightening the last bolt. Crib's done. Sarah ran her hand along the wooden rail. Simple, sturdy, safe. Thank you. It's the least I can do. You're carrying my daughter. Our daughter. The distinction mattered. They'd spent 6 months negotiating what that meant. Co-parenting, shared custody, legal agreements drafted by lawyers who weren't trying to steal anyone's child. They weren't married, weren't engaged, weren't even officially dating. But they were building something. Slowly, carefully, like the crib. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chen. Trial verdict in 1 hour. Are you watching the Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Lysandra Hargrove? The trial had lasted 2 weeks. Charges ranging from conspiracy to commit murder to accessory after the fact. The jury had been deliberating for 1 day. I should watch, Sarah said. You don't have to. I do. I need to see it through. They went downstairs to the library. Sarah's favorite room, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, her mother's genetics textbooks still on the shelves after 18 years. Sarah had moved them from storage, put them back where they belonged. She turned on the television, local news. Live coverage from the courthouse. The jury filed in. 12 ordinary people who'd heard 2 weeks of testimony about murders and conspiracies in wealthy families who thought they were above the law. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Lysandra Hargrove stood motionless as the judge read the sentence. 8 years. Federal prison. Eligible for parole after 5. The camera caught her face. Tears, genuine remorse, or good acting. Sarah turned off the television. One more down, Barrett said quietly. Caspian had been cleared. Self-defense ruling stood. He'd left Boston entirely. Last Sarah heard, he was working construction in Montana, starting over where no one knew the name Hargrove. Dr. Marlo Ashcroft had lost her medical license permanently, pled guilty to medical battery, received probation and community service. She'd sent Sarah a letter, apologizing, explaining why she'd chosen Sarah over Delphine. You were the last real Ashcroft. I thought I was protecting our bloodline from a predator. I was wrong to violate you, but I wasn't wrong about Delphine. Sarah had written back. One line, you saved my daughter from being Delphine's weapon. That doesn't excuse what you did, but I understand why. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that was enough. Are you okay? Barrett asked. I don't know. I wanted justice. I got it. But it doesn't bring anyone back. No, it doesn't. Well, Sarah's hand went to her stomach. 8 months pregnant now. The baby kicked constantly. Strong, healthy, a fighter like her mother. Emmeline deserves better than this, Sarah said. Better than trials in prisons and broken families. She deserves a world where people don't murder each other for money and power. Then we'll build that world for her, starting here. Sarah looked around the library. The Ashcroft estate had been restored with settlement money from the Winterbourne dissolution. Federal compensation for decades of conspiracy. It wasn't enough to replace what she'd lost, but it was something. She was rebuilding. The house, the family name, the legacy. Massachusetts General Hospital had offered her a position. Director of Genetic Ethics, oversight of all genetic research and counseling, ensuring no one else's body was violated the way hers had been. She'd start after maternity leave, after Emmeline was born, after she'd had time to be a mother first, scientist second. I'm scared, she admitted, of what? Of being a mother, of raising a child, of repeating my parents' mistakes. You're not alone, and your parents didn't make mistakes. They made choices. They chose integrity over safety, truth over comfort. Those weren't mistakes. Those were principles. Principles that got them killed. Principles that you inherited, that you proved were worth fighting for. Barrett moved closer. But you don't have to die for them, Sarah. You already won. Now you get to live. She leaned against him. Let him hold her. They'd been doing this more often. Small intimacies, testing whether the bond forced by conspiracy could become something real. What are we doing? She asked. Building furniture, restoring houses, waiting for babies. You know what I mean. I know. He was quiet for a moment. I'm falling in love with you. Slowly, probably too slowly, but it's real. Not because of the baby, not because of shared trauma, because of who you are, what you did, the courage it took to stand against my grandmother when everyone said you'd lose. Sarah pulled back, looked at him. That's the most you've said about feelings in 6 months. I'm not good at feelings. I'm good at business and politics and maintaining composure. But you make me want to be better at feelings. That's a start. Is it enough? For now, and she kissed him, gentle, testing. Ask me again after the baby's born. After the trials are over. After we've had time to be people instead of survivors. I can wait. They stayed in the library until evening, talking, planning, building the future one careful decision at a time. At sunset, Sarah walked through the Ashcroft Estate gardens. The roses were blooming again. Volunteers from the Historical Society had helped restore them, pink and white and deep red, her mother's favorites. She found the spot where Emmeline's ashes had been scattered 18 years ago. The garden had grown wild over the grave. Now it was tended, honored. Sarah knelt, placed her hand on the earth. I did it, Mom. I found the truth. I stopped her. I survived. The wind moved through the roses, carrying the scent of spring and new growth and things that refused to stay buried. Your granddaughter will know your name, your work, what you fought for. She'll grow up knowing that integrity matters, that truth matters, that some things are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. The other Ashcroft survivor, her mother's cousin Catherine, living quietly in Oregon, had reached out after the trials. An awkward phone call. Decades of estrangement couldn't be undone overnight, but Catherine had promised to visit when Emmeline was born. Small steps, rebuilding what Octavia had tried to destroy. Sarah stood, walked back to the house where Barrett waited, where the nursery was ready, where life was waiting to begin again. Behind her, the sun set over Boston, the city where the Winterbourne Circle had ruled for 2 centuries, where that rule had finally ended, not with violence, not with revolution, but with evidence, with courage, with one woman who refused to be silenced. The Ashcroft bloodline had survived, and the legacy it would pass forward wasn't wealth or power or social position. It was something simpler, something stronger. The knowledge that truth backed by evidence could defeat any conspiracy, that competence and courage could challenge any authority, that justice, though delayed, was worth every moment of the fight. Sarah Ashcroft entered her restored family home, closed the door on the past, and turned toward the future. A future where Emmeline Vivian Ashcroft Winterbourne would grow up free, protected, loved. A future earned through 18 years of questions finally answered. A future built on the foundation her mother had started and Sarah had finished. Justice delivered, truth exposed, legacy reclaimed. The circle was broken, the story was complete, and for the first time in 18 years, Sarah could finally rest.